The mysterious disappearance of a young American woman in 2009 shocked her friends, family, and even investigators who were trying to look into the case. In April of that year, the Rochester native packed her bags during her one-week spring break and left with friends almost 1,000 kilometers away from New York City to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where she went missing. Brittany grew up a cheerful and mobile teenager, making great strides in soccer. A few months before her disappearance, Drexel's loved ones noticed that she was becoming increasingly depressed, but everyone attributed it to her parents, who had divorced less than 6 months earlier. There was a lot of fighting in the house with her mother, so Brittany tried to be there as little as possible. Although her parents allowed her to spend this spring break on Lake Ontario with a friend, but Brittany considered herself independent enough and instead went to the fateful Myrtle Beach. For a long time, the Drexel case had no movement until, in 2016, disturbing news broke. An inmate shared a story with prison officials about seeing Brittany a month after her disappearance. Allegedly, he knew her kidnapper and killer. Although there was no evidence other than the testimony of this witness, the FBI still reclassified the case as a murder. Now let's try to examine this story more closely. Life before Brittany Marie Drexel, born on October 7, 1991 in Rochester, New York, had a fairly ordinary childhood. Although her biological father left the family when she was under a year old, her mother, Dawn, married a man named Chad Drexel, who adopted and raised Brittany as his own daughter. Although Drexel was born with a rare right eye condition that required several surgeries and eventually stopped seeing, rendering her blind in one eye, Brittany wore contact lenses to keep her right pupil from wandering. It hardly interfered with her life in sports. She even wanted to become a model and participated in tryout photo shoots. She was full of life, her mother said. Brittany's love was soccer. Although she was small in stature, she could run faster than many boys, lightning speed. But the year of her disappearance, the 17-year-old Gates Chili High School student was going through a serious depression, mostly related to her parents' breakup in 2008. Her passion for soccer began to fade, and her grades were getting lower and lower. Brittany decided to live with her mother, although she saw Chad often and maintained a close relationship with him. The trip with vacation coming up in April 2009, her friends suggested she spend spring break in Myrtle Beach. When Brittany told her mother about the idea, she, not knowing most of her new friends and hearing that there would be no adult chaperones, forbade the trip. Brittany pretended to be resigned and asked if she could then vacation at a friend's house on Lake Ontario. Having been given the green light to do so, without telling Dawn where she was actually going, she left on April 22nd. The girl and her friends arrived in Myrtle Beach on April 23rd and stayed at the Bar Harbor Hotel. On April 24th, she called her mother for the first time and told her she was going to the beach. Dawn thought her daughter meant the lakeshore, and since it was 28 degrees C outside that day, she didn't think much of it. Disappearance. On the evening of April 24th, around 8 p.m., Brittany decides to leave her friends and take a 2.5-kilometer walk to the Blue Water Hotel, where her longtime friend Peter Brozowitz is staying. According to information from her friends, she has walked there at least once before. Surveillance cameras at the Blue Water Resort Hotel showed that Drexel, dressed in a black and white and green blouse, short shorts, flip-flops, and carrying a beige shoulder bag, reached it safely at 8:35 p.m. and left about 10 minutes later. Brozowitz was the last person to see her. That said, during her journey to Bar Harbor, she was text messaging her boyfriend John Greco, who was staying in Rochester because of work. But at about 9:15 p.m., the messages from Brittany's phone suddenly stopped. This struck him as very strange, as the communication cut off on the most important thing. John started calling her friends in Myrtle Beach to find out where she was and what might have happened to her. But they couldn't tell him anything. Investigation. Concerned by her silence, Greco texted Drexel that he would tell her mother about the trip to Myrtle Beach if she didn't respond. Brittany's phone wasn't answering. He did, but before he did, he asked his friend, a U.S. Marine stationed in Lejeune, North Carolina, to drive south and file a missing persons report with the Myrtle Beach Police Department. This was already the morning of April 26th. I think someone saw her walking and offered her a ride, and she got in the car with the wrong person, Greco later speculated. After news of Drexel's disappearance, Some of her friends stayed 2 extra days to help search for her before returning to Rochester. Local police scoured Myrtle Beach, checking out versions of her being seen at a bus stop and a store, but never found anything. They then attempted to trace her phone information by requesting that data from the carrier. It turned out that her phone worked until the early morning hours of April 26th, and according to the signal, it was traveling on Highway 17 and cut off near Georgetown County, 85 kilometers from Myrtle Beach. None of this information helped find the kidnapper, and Drexel's trail was lost for a full 7 years. Meanwhile, the inconsolable mother, in order to be closer to the place where Brittany was last seen, moved to Myrtle Beach for good and repeatedly tried to investigate the case on her own, as well as help the police in every possible way. She initially blamed Brazowitz for her daughter's disappearance, but later changed her opinion to a kidnapping and subsequent sale on the darknet. Suspects. The FBI, which joined the search for Drexel, offered a $25,000 reward for information about the missing schoolgirl. The first real lead didn't come until June 2016, when an inmate at the McCormick Correctional Facility in South Carolina made a curious confession. His name was Taquan Brown, and he claimed to have seen Drexel at an abandoned stash house near McClellanville that he visited on April 27, 2009. She had a black eye, Brown said. There were 8 to 12 guys near her. I'm afraid to even guess what they were doing to her. The next time Brown was there in late May to give money to a man named Timothy Deshawn Taylor, he allegedly heard her being killed. The guy in the yard I knew as Timothy Taylor said to me, "Wait a second," and he went inside. And I heard 2 gunshots. Then I hurried to get the hell out of there because I think he shot somebody. He added that Drexel's body was probably dumped in one of the many alligator ponds, so it's unlikely there will be any trace of Brittany. In part, this story of the girl's abduction and murder was confirmed by investigators. During our investigation, we found that Brittany Drexel's cell phone did leave the Myrtle Beach area, said David Thomas, special agent in charge of the FBI in South Carolina. We believe she ended up in the neighborhood of McClellanville and was most likely murdered. But back to the testimony of Taquan Brown, now serving a 25-year sentence for manslaughter. On his tip, the stash house was searched, but no trace of Drexel was found there. Investigators believe Deshawn probably lured Brittany to McClellanville to sell her. But the disappearance got too much media attention, so the idea fell through, and to cover his tracks, he killed Drexel. Serving prison time for robbery in 2018, Taylor failed a lie detector test when asked about Brittany, but that wasn't enough to get him charged with murder. Brittany Drexel's disappearance is now considered a murder, and the FBI is still offering a reward for any information that leads to the arrest of her killers. Meanwhile, Timothy Taylor, who has been on the loose, has started a rumor that he will pay $15,000 for Brown's head, announcing his cooperation with the police and giving him a reputation as a snitch. Although Brittany Drexel is presumed dead, and the FBI is still offering a reward for any information leading to the arrest of those responsible, there is always hope that she is alive and may return home.